Welcome to my Righteous Fire Raider in review. Now notice I am saying review because this isn't going to be a build guide. I had wanted to do a build guide, I had enjoyed the character, but ultimately after I thought about it for a while, I decided it's really not worth the cost. The cost of entry for even like the budget version of something that would feel pretty decent is way too high for the power you get out of it. There were quite a few people basically saying, hey, your build's crap, and in short, I kind of agree with them a little bit to some extent in terms of the amount of investment we put in versus the power we get out. They might have a point. Ultimately, I enjoyed the character. It was a fast mapper. It was chill bossing. It was relaxing, but the cost just isn't justified. 250x for this level of power just is not worth it. I tend to think that dot skills in general kind of have a low ceiling in terms of how much you can invest in for how much power you can get in. I've always loved investing in Righteous Fire, and I've always been okay with the fact, you know, the ceiling's pretty hard capped. It's going to be very hard pressed for you to push Righteous Fire past 10 million. Whereas if you go to a crit-based build or a hit-based build, you can scale into the tens of millions, sometimes even the hundreds of millions. Ultimately, those builds are often glass cannons, but still the potential is there to do it. Whereas with Righteous Fire and many damage over time skills, you're quite limited to the fact you can only scale dot multi, you can only scale percent damage, and occasionally you can scale a little bit of increased damage taken as, and a little bit of minus res. Whereas with crit-based builds, you can scale attack speed, crit multi, percent damage, pen. You can scale quite a bit more in terms of how much of those stats you can get, and then they multiply together, whereas Righteous Fire, damage over time skills, it's usually just a couple stats, percent damage, and dot multi you can scale a decent amount into, and then a little bit of increased damage taken as, and a little bit of minus res, and the ceiling just stops. So, all in all, I've been a bit of a broken man when it comes to this character. I've enjoyed it, but I don't have the willpower or feel like it would be worth it to recommend to you guys, so I'm just not going to. I'm going to, of course, leave my POB in the description for those of you who really want to copy it anyways, even though I'm not recommending it. And hopefully within the future, my next few builds I make will be better than this one in terms of the cost per power. Definitely always going to try to improve my builds and do better than this one in the future. I've enjoyed this character, but in the end it wasn't good enough. Hopefully, regardless of this outcome, hopefully you guys weren't too disappointed in me and you'll be okay with where I'm going with this, because I wouldn't want to suggest to you guys a build that I didn't fully believe in, a build I didn't fully support, and I can't fully support this one, even though it is Righteous Fire, and I love Righteous Fire. Ultimately, if you're going to do Righteous Fire, best case scenario is probably Inquisitor, and that way you can get the build going without much investment and it just works. Whereas the Raider really requires some investment, and that investment is too high for the initial power you get out of it. So, that's the video, guys. Thanks as always for watching. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, Exiles.